All right, I'll just be up here for a second. I'm introducing Nathan Szanton. Nathan is the president of Szanton Company. I'm sure I'm in the majority of people in this room who know and respect Nathan. We're lucky to have him with us today, as we are with all of our panelists. Thank you again. Nathan started his development company in 1996 with the intention to create affordable and sustainable housing. Nathan's told me that his parents were activists and creating housing was his way of carrying forth that community torch. He and his team develop affordable housing using low-income housing tax credits, known as LIHTC, and historic tax credits. We wish to congratulate him and those on his team on the recent ribbon cutting of the Szanton Company's new building in Old Orchard and welcome him to the stage to tell us more about himself.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, MEREDA, for having me. Can you all hear me okay? Yep. Next slide, please. Actually, I think I can. There we go. I have 3 slides. This is the first of 3. And this is just showing you a little bit about what we do. These are 4 projects that my company has completed. In the upper left-hand corner, it's Casco Terrace on State Street in Portland, which is a 27-unit apartment building that we completed in 2004. It's a vertical addition on a garage. The one in the upper right is the Loft at Saco Falls in Biddeford, which is an 80-unit mixed income project that we completed in 2016. And then in the bottom left is the Hughes School in Bath, which was adaptive reuse of a 1942 elementary school, turning it into 59 units of housing, including a 30-unit addition off to the right of the picture, which is off the picture. And then the one in the bottom right is the project in Old Orchard Beach that Shannon just mentioned, which is called Milliken Heights, which is we just completed and had our ribbon cutting a few weeks ago. That's 55 units for seniors right in the village center of Old Orchard Beach on Portland Avenue. So MEREDA asked me to talk about 2 things, basically. The capital stack for a project of this type, and also the impact of the fast rising construction costs on the kind of work that my company does. So this is the second to last slide, and here I'm just showing you kind of a typical capital stack. And what do we mean by that? Simply mean the stack of types of sources of funds in a project. So it's, I guess, called a stack because, as you can see, there's a sort of a stack of 6 of them there. The first one is equity raised by the sale of 4% low-income housing tax credits. Those are tax credits that are allocated by the State Housing Finance Agency, Maine Housing in our state, and sold usually through a syndicator. In this case, it was Evernorth, which put us into a fund which purchased the tax credits. So that accounted for about 34%, roughly a third of the project costs. And then the next 2 lines are debt that we got from Maine Housing at 5.5% interest in both cases. The first is interest only, and then the second one was a much smaller loan, which is a 15-year amortizing loan, which was designed to be fully amortized over the 15 years of our tax increment financing from the town of Old Orchard Beach. So when that runs out in 15 years, the loan is fully paid off, and we avoid a situation where the TIF ends, our revenue stream ends, yet we still have debt on it to pay. Then the 4th and 5th lines can really be read together because they're really just slightly different flavors of a similar product, which is deferred loan from Maine Housing. And together those make up a little bit less than a third of the project cost. So by deferred debt, I mean debt which doesn't have to be paid back for 30 years, or if you sell the property, you have to pay it back, and it doesn't carry an interest rate. So it functions a little bit like a grant, but in 30 years, the principal is due. So that's the case for both lines 4 and 5. And then line 6 is just about $500,000 of grant money from the Department of Economic and Community Development that comes through. It's a federal resource, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. In this case, it was actually provided to our project in the form of a deferred loan as well. So that will be due in 30 years with no interest, and that money will go to the town of Old Orchard Beach. So that's a capital stack. That's a not uncommon capital stack for new construction of affordable housing. It doesn't have historic tax credits in it because this was ground-up construction, but if we had been working on an existing building, it would have had historic investment tax credits in it as well. I'm moving pretty quickly through this, so I'm happy to answer any questions about any of this during the Q&A. So this is my last slide, and this is, again, I was asked to talk about the impact of the construction inflation that we've been seeing on developers' ability to get deals done and developers' willingness to take risks to do deals. So I'm just speaking from the perspective of our company. It definitely has had an impact on our feelings about guaranteeing construction. So in a project of the types that I do, funders require that we developers guarantee construction completion. So we sign on the dotted line to promise that if the contractor, for whatever reason, can't or won't complete the job, we will line up a second contractor, and if there's any difference in the price that the second contractor charges over the price that the first one committed to, we will pay whatever it takes to get that done. And so as construction costs go up, and they've gone up, they've about doubled in the last 8 years, with most of that inflation coming in the last 3 years. So the amount of risk we take on when we do a construction completion guarantee has doubled in the last 8 years. And that's sobering when you think about the risk-reward calculation. Then pre-development money is at greater risk because pre-development money is the money that we developers put into deals to get them to the point where they get to a closing, of a construction loan closing. So paying lawyers, architects, engineers, surveyors, all the different vendors who we have to use their services to get our deal to fruition. That's pre-development money that we're putting in from our own pockets. And when construction prices are rising as rapidly as they are, there's always a question mark about whether, at the end of the day, the deal is going to pencil out when you're finished design and you price it. Are the prices going to be so high that you just don't have enough sources to cover it, in which case the deal dies. And so you lose all your pre-development money. So that's has an impact on the cost-benefit, risk-benefit analysis. And then the developer fee is at greater risk. The developer fee is the fee that we get paid. It's per a formula. In the case of a Maine Housing, low-income housing tax credit deal, it's a formula that Maine Housing has, which is on a per-unit basis. That fee is kind of the construction contingency of last resort. If construction prices have risen to a point where you just can't cover it all with your sources of funds, like the capital stack that I showed you, then developers tend to just say, okay, I'll just take less fee, and that's what fills the gap. So that's at risk when construction prices are fast rising. And then in terms of the impact on closing deals, so the Maine Housing process, I think it very intelligently requires us to do pretty detailed construction pricing estimates at several points in the process. When we submit an application, when we get to the 50% design complete mark, when we get to the 90% design complete mark, and then, of course, the 100% you actually go out and get your bids. But at each of those steps along the way, if prices have gone up and your contractor is saying, well, now it's going to cost this much, whereas before we thought it was going to be this much, then you have to cease the development process while you work to try to get back into budget, try to come up with sources to cover those uses. Every time that happens, it makes the whole process take longer, and you incur more risk. You're spending more overhead, more salaries that you're paying staff to work on the project, more rent for your office space, and all of that. So that's an impact. And then the last one, this is kind of very fresh in my mind because we had a huge issue with this on a project that just closed a few weeks ago. Construction period insurance, also known as builder's risk insurance, that developers have to take out to cover you for a loss during construction. So let's say you're in the construction process and there's a big fire, or there's a big water event that causes a lot of water damage. Builder's risk insurance will cover that. And what you pay for that is a function of A, the duration of construction, and B, the cost of construction. So in the last 8 years, as I mentioned, prices have just about doubled. And also duration has just about doubled because of the labor shortage. Things take so much longer now than they used to do. Case in point, the lofts at Saco Falls in Biddeford that I showed you a slide of, we built that in 11 months. It was 80 units, 11 months, and it was $10 million of construction. The Lewiston project we just closed a few weeks ago is 72 units, so just about the same, actually fewer units, $20 million construction cost, so doubled, and it's going to be a 22-month construction timetable. So because when the timetable doubles and the cost doubles, the insurance quadruples, because the insurance is a function of both axes, if you will. So we underestimated our insurance. We had in our budget about $130,000 for builder's risk insurance because the one 8 years ago had been $85,000, and we thought, oh, we'll just bump it up, what seems like a healthy margin. But because both the duration and the cost had doubled, it actually quadrupled in cost from $85,000 to $374,000. So that, all of a sudden, we had a hole in our budget. We also had a very difficult time finding an insurance company to provide that product, but we found one, but it had a big budgetary implication. So for those of you working on projects out there, I would say definitely check in with your insurance agency, talk about what your insurance costs are going to be, especially if you're working on a large industrial building, which insurance companies are very nervous about right now. So anyway, thank you very much for having me, and I'll turn it back over to John.